Live from First Street Studios in South Tampa, Florida. It's time for another round of Last Call.
You know what, Dan? Our wonderful producer talked about it a little bit last segment, and we started to allude to it. So I think we should talk about it here. The changes to Major League Baseball.
Do you like it?
Yes and no.
Well, I think it's yes and no with any sport that makes a change.
I like the fact that it, as Jess alluded to, it speeds up the game. When I played baseball, I was a catcher, and I'm telling you, the check pitches, it'd be, you'd be catching, throw a pitch, guy on first base, turn. Throw a pitch, turn. I mean, we're talking a game that was 4 hours long that's been cut. Jess, you went to a Rays game, you said it was what, 2 hours? In and out. When we got work the next day, you don't want to be there for 6-7 hours while the guy tries to figure out pitch count. Some of them I don't like, though. I think the runner on second base to start the 10th inning is Bush League. I think that's idiotic. I don't like that. I think that's too much trying to reinvent the wheel. I'm okay with getting rid of the shift. Okay, the shift, it was great back in 1943. Gas was 10 cents in 1943.
Yeah, White Castle burger 5 cents. I got it.
And so you have to adapt to the game, but points I don't like is where he tries to turn it into too much of a video game. That's where I don't like. Now, one thing that I'm sort of into, this playoff format. And we had a real heated discussion on Facebook about this. Some people absolutely can't stand the playoff format where the teams with the best records, best 2 records in each league, get a bye. This year it played out. Baltimore, best record in the AL, done in 3 games, swept. Dodgers, swept. Braves, gone in 3 games. They won 1 game.
Rays,
swept. I mean, is the bye good for baseball? I mean, is it good for the playoffs? I mean, to me, it just seems like the only sport that people seem to have a problem. Nobody has a problem with in the NFL.
No.
I mean, but do you think it's okay for baseball? Because you think...
Well, what I have a problem with is the inconsistency of the way fans look at it.
Right.
Okay? Because, look, then why aren't we bitching about the buy-in in the NBA?
Right.
Not the buy-in, but the play-in.
The play-in, right.
I mean, why are we doing that?
I'll tell you right now, if the Dodgers, Orioles, Braves, and 14, if all the higher seeded teams won, would we be complaining?
No.
Or are we moaning and groaning like a bunch of puerile 5-year-olds because the money-making teams didn't win? So what? It's baseball. The best team will come out on top. It's not, you can win 120 games. Remember the one year the Mariners won like 118 games and they got bounced in the playoffs? Listen, October's its own world. And in any other sport, Dan, a bye is a good thing. That gives them, these other teams are out there beating each other up after a 162-game schedule. This team gets 3 games off. They get to rest, recover, lick their wounds, let some of their injured players come back. What's a bad thing?
But but I guess there's a couple things you could look at. Is it really a physical game? I played it my whole life, so I have an opinion. I've played football, did the MMA scene. Yeah. Baseball is not hard.
It's not hard.
So here's my point, though. Mm-hmm. So if there's a bye, what does it do to the stadium in the income ratio of not having those games there?
Knocks it down a few notches.
Quite a few, because we just were talking about the same thing a few segments ago with the Rays.
Right.
So, look, I don't care what anybody says. We could argue it all day. Baseball is not physical at all, unless you get hit by a ball. That's about, there's no comparison from hockey, even the NBA. Right?
She's throwing stuff at us because she don't want.
Are you mad?
She's throwing stuff because she's throwing stuff at us because she didn't like the fact that baseball's not physical.
No, but my point to it is,
I agree with you, Jess. It is a physical game. You just throw stuff at him.
Go ahead. But my point, if you think about it, okay, baseball. People who play baseball say, "Oh, it's physical." No, it's not. You know what I'm saying? It's not. What's that? It is. It's much like golf, right? So my point to the whole thing is, when you look at sports that are played that have a bye, right?
Yeah.
They're generally physical games and physical play. Anybody that sits there and says Major League Baseball is more physical than the National Basketball League, the NBA, right? You're crazy.
Of course not. Hockey, not even close.
Hockey, you're crazy. NASCAR, not even close, right? Even when you're hitting and rubbing and banging, you're getting hit, right? Baseball, the only time there's a risk in the sport is if you get hit by the pitcher or you slide into a bag. I was going to say, good point. But, and then you even look at soccer. It's physically more demanding than baseball.
Sure.
And let's not even talk about boxing or MMA. So when we talk a buy, I got to argue with you a little bit because, and by no means am I saying Major League Baseball isn't athletic. That's not my point.
I know what you're saying.
But physicality-wise, why do you think they can play? Okay, here's a good point. Why can you play 160 games plus the playoffs with very minimal injuries? But in the NFL, you play 3 games and half your roster is decimated.
Hold that thought.
Okay.
I'm going to respectfully disagree with you on something. Is it physical in the same sense that football is? Absolutely not. And I'm not going to come on here and insult anybody and tell them it is. It's not hockey, it's not soccer, it's not MMA, it's not boxing. Physical? No. But 162 games, and that's not even including spring training, which is an entire month in its own right. No play in 2025. So we're talking almost 200 games.
100%.
And you're talking 3 games in Tampa, then the next night there are 3 games in LA, 3 games in Seattle, 3 games in Minnesota, Minneapolis, St. Paul.
Yeah.
Physically, no. But 200 games of that, 162, throwing the baseball, traveling to sleeping in a different hotel, sometimes 3, 4, 5, 6 times a week. That will take an emotional and physical tear on you.
It's a mental grind. It's a physical grind. Okay. It's exhausting for pitchers, I'm sure, the recovery and all that, being away from the family. It's a different stressor. It's a different physicality. Is that a good way to put it?
That's a great way, but by no means, I know what you're saying. You're saying it by no means, listen, this isn't tiddlywinks. This isn't some game you download on your iPhone or your Android device that any ham and egger can play. You have to be the creme de la creme, but we're comparing it to the others. You're absolutely right. I'll be the first to tell you. You don't got guys walking out of baseball with brain damage.
Right.
You don't got guys walking out of baseball most of the time. Now, I want to get a professional Major League Baseball in here. They may disagree.
We've got a few we can bring in.
Maybe they'll give us most of these guys are with their facilities. Most of these guys still have their body parts mostly intact. The pitchers might say otherwise. The catchers, because, you're a catcher, you're bent down, squatting for, 160 games. That's, as I used to say before El Caca Grande, that kind of stinks after a while. But we're not even talking the same avenue where these football players are getting hip replacements, knee replacements. You see guys like Mongo McMichael, who has ALS, which is a big part of, the brain damage. So by no means, I know you're not insulting the
not at all
athletic, but it's a different type of physicality.
But the caveat from that, what I'm trying to tell you though is, there is an analytical background before analytics were even analytics, right? That there is a data format that somebody created back in the early 1900s that said Major League Baseball players can go 160 games without fail, meaning the average player. Our season can expand this far. Yep. Would you agree?
Yeah.
And we can sustain it over time. Now, we will have some rotator cuffs, some knee blows, right? Some ankle bust on bases. Very rare, though.
Yeah.
The pitchers are probably the most vulnerable for injuries, or maybe an outfielder that goes for a beautiful, heroic catch.
Right.
Or a sliding into the bag, and you might pull a groin.
Yeah.
So I got it. But somehow the NBA said we could play 80-plus games. Would you agree?
Right, absolutely.
Okay. And somehow hockey's in the 80s. Yeah. And then the NFL says, okay, we're getting a little bit better here. We're going to have a bye. Now we got Thursday games, right? So we get the extended bye.
Right.
So we could go 17 games plus playoffs. So the PGA, on the other hand, they could play 50 tournaments a year.
Right.
Or 32, and then if you go overseas and whatever. So there's a formula to tell you that, in my mind, it's hard to be a diehard baseball fan, like we talked about in the beginning.
Yeah.
To stay engaged over basically a 9-month period, especially if you're a spring training guy coming in what, March?
Absolutely.
March all the way to February.
Right.
Okay. And in between there, you're asking everybody else to turn off football during that time and go to all these games. Because let's be honest, I think what's happened in sports that people don't ever talk about. Look, if you are a mother or a father, starts there. If your kids are in Pop Warner Pee Wee football. All right, so check this shit out though. My bad.
Fijis.
But check this out, because this makes a lot of sense though. So let's just start Monday, start of the week. We got Monday Night Football.
Yeah.
Now we got Thursday Night Football. Now we got Friday Night Lights, high school football. Then Saturday we have college football.
Right.
And then we have Sunday. So our country is indoctrinated by football. And by the way, not only are your kids playing on Friday night if they're in high school, or Saturday with you, and youth football, Pop Warner, Pee Wee League, or whatever we're calling it right now, right? Like Babe Ruth for baseball, right back when we played. So that season of, I guess, let's just call it late August, all the way through February, it's like a craziest time of your life, the ups and downs of a Dallas Cowboy fan or of a Tampa Bay fan. And plus your kids playing at Jesuit here, your kids over here at Robinson or Plant. You got to go to that game. Then we got to get the little grasshoppers to Pop Warner so they can play there, or I-9 Sports for flag football for my girl,
right.
You know, so, which is, by the way, becoming like #1 sport in the world.
Yeah.
But when you think about those things, it's like, it almost, baseball kind of starts and gets us through to, I guess you would say, or hockey, right? Or NBA, more or less, the Final Four, gets us to opening day of football.
Right.
And then what ends up happening, though, is football is God. I hate to say it, but, or king. How about that? We'll say king
works.
But with that being said, it's hard to juggle all of that other stuff and have a Major League Baseball playoff game at 3 o'clock in Tampa.
That's awesome.
I mean, I don't know who would have thought that, but it's, to me, is ridiculous. Now, other people will say, well, these teams play at this time and these teams play at this time or whatever. But the difference is, you would take a playoff game off for the NFL because there's one of them. Right. There's not 7 of them.
That's true.
So you see where I'm going with this? So I've read all these fanatics, right, on social media, like, I can't believe, but you would go to a playoff game for this, or for that. No, what you're missing is if we are in the hot seat, we get 4 at home.
Right.
If we're in the bad seat, we get 3.
Right.
So let's say it goes 7. So you want me to get off work 7 or 4 of those or 3 of those days? No, I'm not using all my PTO or my comp time or my leave for that. Put the game at night, right?
Especially following back what we talked about, the distance from here to St. Petersburg. People that live here, that's like, you got an hour and a half just to get to the ballpark.
With traffic, right? Especially on the Gandies. So I don't know, dude, what all the right answers are and whatever we're all talking about here. But I look at Major League Baseball as still one of my favorite sports.
Right.
Do I like the adjustments and all the rule changes and everything? Does it affect the lineage and honors of the sport? That's a question to you. Because what I would tell you is, same thing with golf. We'll move into that next. Yeah. Maybe we have to jump up on that with Jessica, because I believe in that too, as far as pulling the ball back or taking the equipment out of the hands of the golfer. But it kind of goes to the same point. I am good with rule changes in the sport if it doesn't ruin the history and the lineage of why these sports remain so relevant. Why Babe Ruth, Mickey Mantle baseball cards are worth $100,000. Right. Why we have records. Why we have the Sports Hall of Fame, right, of all of them, right, or the Pro Football Hall of Fame in Canton. We have to keep it somewhat similar, right, as we evolve as humans and we get faster and we get stronger and we get better and equipment gets better, right?
Absolutely.
We have to keep, still, like in the military, like where I'm retired from, I always say, it's the lineage and the honors and the history that is what keeps these sports relevant to this day. It's a generational thing that we pass on to our children. So that's the subject that we're missing here. If that makes point. Because otherwise we have this Hall of Fame, and then there's a divider, well, when the sport changed.
Oh,
So let's close on this. Go ahead.
I'll fire my final thoughts on this one, okay? And you brought up some great points. One thing I want to establish here, too. Does football even have an off-season anymore? Because let's be honest, the game's end. You got Super Bowl Sunday wrapping up, and the Lombardi trophies handed out, the confetti's coming down, some ham and egg, I'm going to Disneyland, or whatever, Disney World, whatever the clown says now. I know that's probably a thing of the 80s, but...
He still did it. Patrick Mahomes did.
Okay, Mahomes did. You go from that to the draft, to the combine, to free agency, to the coaching carousel, the this, that, the other thing, the recruiting in college football. Before you know it, it's preseason. So NFL doesn't even have an offseason anymore because those side things that were normally the offseason where we take a break have become a life of its own.
And not to mention the injection of the XFLs and
TFL,
the CFLs and the USFL back in the day, right? So that is why I think the other leagues don't work. But that's another conversation.
But my final thoughts on this about baseball, and the point you hit straight on, hit out of the park. Grand slam home run, pun intended. One thing we have in baseball that we do not have in any other sport. Those of you that are lucky enough to have your grandparents still around, mine's unfortunately long gone.
Mine are too.
All right. I can sit down with my father and I can listen to him talk about Mickey Mantle, Willie Mays, Brooks Robinson,
Roger Maris.
It doesn't ring the same when they're talking about Johnny Unitas and Y.A. Tittle and Dick Butkus, God rest his soul. Great guys, but does it ring the same? Do those players have the same allure that Mickey Mantle did, that Willie Mays did? I mean, so that is what they have, the history of it. And I'm going to follow up what you said. I agree 100%. Change it. Change is always necessary, but do not ruin the allure and the history of the game.
Yeah, because otherwise it's not a game.
Then it's a video.
Yeah, and then that's what we really have to focus on. Anytime you make rule changes, even in the NFL, ever since the Super Bowl years, I think 67 or something, it kicked in, right?
Yeah.
Now those are Super Bowl Lombardi trophies that are very hard to come by. Well, Brady would disagree. But other than him, they're very hard to come by. So you never want to jeopardize the game of football and start moving it around. They've shortened it up. Now it's like 3 hours and 40 minutes or 3 hours. Now it's like 3 hours and 22 minutes average game. But that's okay as long as it's the same size field, same size goalpost, same 2-point conversion, same extra point. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
And we'll talk about that later in golf where I have a concern with what's going on there. But as long as the basketball court remains the same, the baseball field, obviously, some fences are bigger, some are smaller, but you all are playing on the same field.
Absolutely.
So when you move out to Arizona, for instance, we know it's at altitude, so there's more homers hit there, right? But everybody gets a crack to play there.
Yes.
So when you think of it big picture wise, I think we talked enough on this. We'll get back to it later on. But it's good to discuss the history of our sports because I think it's really like what baseball used to be America's favorite pastime.
Yeah.
And then NFL is king, we know. But it's important to keep those things because when we pass those on to our children, it's what keeps us sane, so to speak, when the fringe around the world is going on, or the wars that people have fought, right? And sports have always brought our country together in the worst times, right? So is that a good point?
That's a great point
To end on?
You remember the quote from, and we can use this for all sports. You remember the movie Field of Dreams?
Yes.
That quote from, played Darth Vader, James Earl Jones.
Yeah.
I can't believe I forgot James Earl Jones. It's my favorite movie. That one quote he said, the one consistent throughout all the years has been baseball.
Yeah.
The one consistent throughout all the years is sports. People may think it's minuscule and they think it's minute. It takes us away from all that rigmarole that's going on out there.
Yeah, the fringe.
Like I said.
Yeah.
The fringe, the lunatic fringe.
Yeah, and that's a good point. But we'll stop there. We'll pick it up in a little bit.
Welcome back to Last Call 76. I'm Jay with my main man, the man of the hour, too sweet to be sour, the one and only Dan Dano. I hear we got some gifts today, my man. In fact, I hear we got some mail.
We got mail.
Not to be confused with Blue's Clues mail.
Last call fan mail. Something we're adding is our people ask us questions. If you hit the subscribe, go into the questions or go into the comments. ask questions, and we're going to answer them to the best that we can, as true, as we can possibly break it down.
We don't fabricate.
We're not going to fabricate. We're not going to lie. We're just tell you how we feel. So why don't you grab it? And let's start with the fan mail this week.
Here we go. And by the way, these are our opinions. We don't do hot takes. We speak from our heart. All right, Dan. Question number 1. Let's take a look. We got a bunch of them here today, my man. Not bad for
lots.
All right. Number 1, this is coming from my main man, Al. Wants to know, how will the WWE UFC merger with TKO affect their independent contractor status? Meaning, I'm thinking he's talking about, will they be able to finally get benefits, health insurance, 401k? Will these people finally be treated like employees and less like, meat?
Well, so I think the big misunderstanding is we're going to answer these within 2 or 3 minutes. That's our standard, right? Mm-hmm. So I'll say my piece. The UFC does give health care, but it's only in the time when they're signed for a fight. Isn't that correct?
Right.
Okay, so they take care of all medical.
Right.
It's just when they're not under a contract for a fight, is my understanding.
Absolutely.
Now, does the WWE wrestlers, do they get it full time?
No.
Okay,
now,
so
there's someone that might be able to answer how they were with injuries. I think they handle injuries the same way, but go ahead.
Okay, so that's my point. So maybe with the merger, it might fix that, but maybe not. But I just don't like it when people say they're not getting health care, because once they sign a contract, from my understanding is, and we're kind of experiencing this, if they get injured in a training camp or whatever, once they sign a contract, because they're preparing for that, they can get free medical care from the UFC. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
So maybe the answer is they will, but I'm not so sure that the WWE, with the merger of what was it called again? TKO. So I'm not sure that makes anything better 401k wise or anything else. So what's your say? And then we'll wrap this one up.
Quick brief and to the point. I think it's going to take a group of people all to agree for these parameters. And believe me, you can't get these guys, and we've been around enough UFC fighters, Dan, we can't get them all to agree what to eat for lunch, let alone making the concessions they're going to have to make in order for them not to be independent contractors. So I don't see that ever happening on either WWE or UFC side.
Okay, and that's a wrap on this question. We'll get back to you next week on another one.